All right. So hello, everyone. Again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Carrie Molkowski. I am the National Programs Manager at FAIR, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation, where we'll discuss food allergy management for New York City preschool and early child care educators and staff. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This presentation will be recorded, so please note that for maintaining a quality recording, all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. However, you can submit questions throughout the broadcast by using both the questions and chat features in the GoToWebinar toolbar that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. So if we're able to, we will respond to some moderated questions for our presenters at the end of the webinar. So today's session will again provide New York City preschool and early child care staff with a foundation of knowledge to successfully manage food allergies, avoid exposure to allergens, and to be able to recognize and respond if a food allergy emergency does occur. And to do that with today, we have with us two key speakers. First, we have Gina Klaus. Gina is the National Director of Training for FAIR and a former Program Director for the Centers of Disease Control. She developed educational tools and trained on the national guidelines for food allergy management in schools. She currently serves on an international panel developing evidence-based global guidelines for food allergy management in schools. A well-known trainer and coach, her advice has appeared in numerous print, radio, and television features, including CNN, People Magazine, and ABC World News. She is also a columnist for Allergic Living magazine and author of the best-selling children's book, One of the Gang, Nurturing the Souls of Children with Food Allergies. Additionally, we have Tanisha Hopkins. Tanisha is the Director of Health, Mental Health, and Nutrition at New York City's Administration of Child Services, Child and Family Wellbeing. So today, Gina is going to kick off the presentation. So at this time, I am delighted to turn it over to her. Okay, Gina, so take it away.
So this is Amaria Johnson. Her mother didn't know when she put the pink ribbons in her hair that morning that it would be the last time she'd see her daughter alive. The school was aware of her peanut allergy and asthma. Her mother and grandparents believed that she would never eat something that she wasn't sure about, that she was a child. It was reported that another child, unaware of her allergy, gave her a peanut at recess. Amaria, like many kids, she knew right away something was wrong. She told the teacher, "I ate something bad." The teacher took her to the school health clinic. By this time, Amaria was covered with hives. The health aide tried to administer her asthma meds, but this was a full-blown allergic reaction and not asthma. The reaction was progressing very quickly. They tried to reach her mother. Amaria was crying hysterically, saying, "My throat, my throat." At some point, 911 was called. Amaria was in severe distress at this point, and she collapsed. She stopped breathing. The health aide administered CPR, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already in cardiac arrest. She was pronounced dead at the hospital a short time later. That's how fast this can happen. No one had any idea that this was the day that lives would be changed forever. And that's why we're here today, to have an understanding and a healthy respect for food allergies and anaphylaxis, to prevent a similar tragedy from happening to any other child or family. So today I'll go over food allergies and allergic reactions, emergency care plans, how to recognize and treat an allergic reaction, some general food allergy management, and then a little bit of time will be spent on preparing and serving food. So 1 in 13 children have food allergies today. According to a Centers for Disease Control study, there was a 50% increase in food allergies between 1997 and 2011. Almost 1 in 3 children with a food allergy has multiple food allergies, and this is much more difficult to manage. And importantly, preschool and daycare children are at highest risk of food allergic reactions in school. Most allergic reactions that happen in school occur in the daycare or preschool setting. 1 in 6 children with food allergies have had a reaction while at school or in childcare. And as many as 1 in 4 people, and that's students and staff, given epinephrine, that's the medicine in what you might know as the EpiPen. 1 in 4 times that's given in school, it's to someone who had no previous diagnosis of food allergy. So what is a food allergy? A food allergy is when exposure to a food triggers a harmful immune response. Something that may be normally considered innocent, the immune system attacks it. And it can be any form. It doesn't have to be an unhealthy food. It can be an organic form. Doesn't matter. For whatever reasons, the immune system has learned a bad lesson and wants to attack that food protein in the body. A food intolerance is something different. You may have heard of lactose intolerance, where someone can't digest a milk sugar. This is a different kind of health issue. Sometimes the symptoms can look a little bit similar, but importantly, food intolerance is not life-threatening. Most allergic reactions are caused by actually ingesting an allergen. Usually this is eating. This is where we see most of the severe reactions. But reactions can also be caused by contact and less commonly inhalation. In the United States, 8 foods cause the majority of food allergy reactions: milk, wheat, egg, peanuts, tree nuts, nuts, soy, and shellfish, and fish. But a person could be allergic to virtually any food. There have been recorded reactions to even lentils cooking on the stove. So all food reactions need to be taken seriously. What is anaphylaxis? Anaphylaxis is a severe, life-threatening allergic reaction. That's what happened to Amaria, and it requires immediate response and medical attention. There are some studies that look into fatal reactions, and most fatal reactions are associated with a delay in receiving epinephrine, and this is something we can do something about. So we want to be prepared to recognize and understand what this is, to have a healthy respect for food allergies so that we know that a severe reaction has to be treated quickly. And one of the first steps is having a child with an emergency care plan or some type of documentation of the allergy and of the treatment. Every child with a food allergy should have his or her own emergency care plan. The plan will list the child's allergies, symptoms of a mild or severe allergic reaction, what medications are used to treat these reactions, because these will vary. These plans are individualized, and different children with different histories and other medical conditions that they have will necessitate different plans. So these are based on the child's unique medical history. And then instructions for how to use the epinephrine autoinjector. An epinephrine autoinjector you may know by the name EpiPen or Auvi-Q. These are the autoinjectors used to treat a severe allergic reaction. Again, these plans are individualized by the child's doctor or medical professional. And you want to be aware of every child in your care who has food allergies or any type of severe allergies and has an emergency care plan. So if you have another student or another child in your care who maybe seems tired and has his or her head, slumped down on the desk, you may think, okay, well, little Nathan may be tired today. But if you see that in a child with food allergies, you want to make sure that you're treating or ruling out an allergic reaction to make sure that you're seeing that child through the allergy lens. The symptoms of anaphylaxis or a severe allergic reaction are varied. I won't go through all these symptoms now, but at the end of the presentation, we'll give you links so you can download FAIR's anaphylaxis care plan, and all of these symptoms will be listed on there. And it's a lot to be aware of. Here are some key things. Sometimes parents and teachers misunderstand. A child may have only had mild reactions in the past or may have only had hives to a substance in the past, but that doesn't mean they won't have a severe or even fatal reaction in the future. Next, once a reaction starts, there's no way to predict its course. Often a reaction can start mildly with a few hives or just a feeling. One of the symptoms of anaphylaxis can be a feeling of impending doom. A child often knows, or an adult, that something is wrong. But there's no way to say this is just a mild reaction, even if it would present with something like a few hives. A reaction can turn serious in just a few minutes. And children can describe a reaction differently than adults. An adult may understand and be able to describe to you, I'm having an anaphylactic reaction. I think I ate something that may have contained my allergen. But children often describe things in a different way. This is another download that we can share with you through the FAIR website. For example, it often feels like something's stuck in their throat, but in fact, their throat may be actually closing from a severe allergic reaction. Kids will often spit out a food. They'll say it's spicy, it's too hot because it's bothering their mouth. So it's good to be aware of how a child might describe a reaction, especially because we know they're very common in the younger age groups. An allergic reaction typically occurs relatively quickly, within a few seconds to within a couple of hours. Sometimes it can be more than a few hours. So even a child in your care who may not have eaten anything could be coming from breakfast or a snack in the car that may have been dangerous to them. So you want to be aware of all children with food allergies and how a reaction looks. Epinephrine, which is also adrenaline, is the medicine that's used to treat anaphylaxis. And it comes in pre-measured, what we call auto-injectors. So you'll follow the child's emergency care plan, which will tell you how to treat mild reactions or severe reactions. Epinephrine is very safe and simple to administer. It comes in auto-injectors. We have records of a child as young as 3 administering an epinephrine auto-injector for his mother. So they're easy to use. Even young children are able to use them. Once epinephrine is administered, it means that we've recognized that this is a severe allergic reaction. You want to call 911. Tell the operator that the child is having an allergic reaction, and you want an ambulance with epinephrine and staff trained to use it. There are different regulations across the country. Some ambulances and EMTs do not carry epinephrine regularly. Sometimes they'll carry it, but staff has to have certain training to use it, so you want to make sure that you have both. And in New York City, you're in the next few weeks or months will have specific training on when and how and who will be able to administer epinephrine auto-injectors in your center. Once epinephrine has been administered, you want to lay the person flat with their legs raised, keep them warm. If they're vomiting, which may be common, they could lay on their side or sit up. You don't want to walk them around. It's also important to know that in some cases there's a secondary reaction, especially if the first dose was delayed. So you'll want to be aware of when a second dose is needed. We would like to see anyone who experiences anaphylaxis going to the hospital. It's not because epinephrine is dangerous, but other drugs can be administered by medical personnel. Again, emergency care plans are individualized. For some students and children, the doctor may recommend an antihistamine for milder reactions. Not all doctors recommend this, and depending on the child's history, their emergency care plan may tell you to use epinephrine with any symptoms. Talk with the doctor, make sure that the plan is clear to the staff and the parent. Generally, mild symptoms are the following, a little bit of an itchy nose, sneezing, a little bit of itchy mouth, hives, or swelling. But when you have more than two or more systems involved, you should suspect anaphylaxis. And again, this can be easily clarified on the child's documentation. Now we'll talk a little bit about food allergy management in your centers. Really involves a team approach with the child and the parents, the staff, and then the medical care provider. You want to make sure that everybody today, anybody caring for children today, needs to have a healthy respect and understanding of food allergies. You want the environment to be safe but also inclusive. You want to address the child's individual needs, and you want to have some type of center guidelines to minimize the risk for exposure to allergens. A student may need other modifications, and these can be addressed through the overall guidelines and through an individual accommodation plan for the child. So if a certain child needs things above and beyond what a typical allergic child needs, you can address that in a written plan. And sometimes it can be put into an IEP. In K through 12 school, it's a 504 plan. But if the child already has an IEP, you can write some of these additional health accommodations into the IEP plan. At FAIR, we rely a lot on the national guidelines for managing food allergies in schools and early care and education programs. And I'm going to go over some of the recommended practices to reduce risk of exposure to allergens that these guidelines recommend. One is to avoid the use of identified allergens in food, class, projects, art, crafts, or activities. So in other words, if you would have a bean allergy or a peanut allergy, you don't want to do crafts with dried beans in that classroom. You don't simply want to just have the child that's allergic to beans avoid it. Just find another material. Is a lot easier. Today, more and more classrooms they're designating food-free areas. We may not eat in the desk, but we eat in the back of the room, or even food-free rooms when possible. And I realize that's not always possible. So celebrations are a time that we see a lot of risk. Anything outside the norm seems to pose additional risk to kids with allergies. We often hear of parties with outside food that maybe a well-meaning parent brought in, home baked goods. These can pose a lot of risk. So be very, very cautious with events outside the norm, and consider having a food-free celebrations or using trinkets or toys for the take-home party treat bags, with so many kids having allergies today. In general, it's smart to restrict outside food, especially bakery items, ice cream parlor items, or candy treats, and restaurant foods, which have a very high risk of cross-contact with allergens. And unfortunately, there have been fatalities from all of these categories in schools, where well-meaning teachers, staff, or parents wanted to have a fun celebration for students, and unfortunately, it ended up in a very bad way for students at risk with food allergies. Again, non-food celebrations, can be especially done easily for birthdays. More and more schools and districts and child cares are looking for non-food celebrations. So, children can be the line leader, or parent can come in and read a book, or donate a game, or extra recess. There are lots of creative ways to celebrate and acknowledge the child for a birthday or for a job well done that don't involve food. Make sure that staff is aware, especially substitute teachers. There needs to be a mechanism to relay the important health information to substitute teachers and staff. Volunteers also, this is a risk area where a well-meaning volunteer can come into the classroom. A child asks a question. For example, this happened once where a child asked a well-meaning parent volunteer if these particular pretzels were safe for him, but the pretzels actually were produced on lines with peanut and caused a reaction. So you just want to be aware and make sure that if your volunteers are having anything to do with the children with food allergies, that they're aware that you have precautions in place. For extracurricular activities or field trips, you can invite the parents of children with food allergies to accompany. This should be in addition to regular chaperones, not in place of that, because we all know how difficult it is to manage children in these outside activities. So you can invite them, but you can't make it a requirement that they attend. And think about the safety of these events for children. Often well-meaning teachers think of things like a stop at the ice cream stand or a stop at a certain restaurant, and you have to think about the kids in your classroom and their individual food allergies and what might be safe and inclusive for them as well. Transportation staff is another issue. A few months ago, there was unfortunately a fatality that happened when a young girl had a reaction on the school bus, ate something that she believed was safe for her, and she started vomiting, got very sick, and unfortunately she passed away due to reaction. So it's very good if transportation staff understands and has procedures and protocols for how to treat food allergy and other emergencies. In general, it's a great idea to restrict food being eaten on the bus except by children who need to have snacks at different times, such as those with diabetes. So one of the most important things is having rapid access to the epinephrine autoinjectors. Again, an example is the AV2 or the EpiPen. They need to be around all the time. So is there a lockdown? Is there a walk to the corner? Is it recess? Is it physical education? Is it a fire drill? Where are the epinephrine autoinjectors at all these different times? They need to be quickly accessible. So talk a little bit about preparing and serving food. You'll want to consider each child's food allergies while shopping, reading labels, and make sure that every ingredient used, including spices and condiments, you never want to use common sense when determining if a food is safe. You need to read the label every single time. We've found egg ingredients in lemonade and lollipops. We've found peanut and nut flour in jelly beans, peanut oil chips and potato chips and corn chips cooked in peanut oil. milk and canned tuna. There are things that you can't really imagine, why this ingredient was put in there. So you can never use common sense and say, I don't need to read the chili label or the pasta sauce because that wouldn't have peanut, because often it does. Not often, but these things happen. So you have to manage food allergies well, you need to have a little bit of an understanding, or a lot of the understanding, about how we label in the United States. The labeling laws in the United States require that the top 8 allergens be identified in plain English. And that means in some way that these top 8 allergens have to be indicated with these names below on a label. They can be listed in one of 2 ways. So in the green, the first example, if they write whey protein, you may not know that whey is a milk protein. So you have to put in parentheses milk. If you put natural flavors and those natural flavors refer to a top 8 allergen, then you have to name what the allergen is. So then say the natural flavors was fish, you'd have to put fish in parentheses. Or in this case, the natural flavors are almonds, so they have to indicate almond. The second way is a different way. Here again, it's the same ingredients, so they put whey protein and they put natural flavors, but at the bottom they put contains milk, referring to the whey protein, or almond, referring to the natural flavors. There's a huge misconception that allergens have to be identified in the second way with the bolded contains statement. They don't have to be. They can be indicated within the ingredients, like in the green example number 1. So again, top 8 allergens have to be called out in plain English, and you see an example here. In the past, before our current labeling laws, you could have put flour on the label, and you didn't have to indicate, was it corn flour, was it soy flour, was it wheat flour. Today, you have to put wheat flour on there because it's a top 8 allergen. Now here's the other way that we talked about. At the bottom, they have called out wheat and peanut. They also list it within the label, but you can see they're bolding it. But again, this way is optional. You don't have to list it this way. And it's really important to know, because some people mistakenly depend on that bottom statement instead of reading through every ingredient. Unfortunately, to stay safe, you have to read through all of those ingredients. And a lot of care has to be taken for children who have allergies outside of the top 8. For example, sesame is an increasingly common allergen, and sesame does not have to be spelled out on the label. So if you see this example here, at the bottom it says natural flavor. They can put something, not the top 8, but they can put other things. So for example, sesame is a very potent allergen, mustard, garlic. Things could be flavored with those other allergens, and they don't have to be listed. If you have a child who's allergic to fruits, kiwi, berry, they can say natural flavor, and they don't have to spell it out on the label. One of the ways that you can try to get to the bottom of what's in there if you need to find out for a child is to call the manufacturers. Most will tell you, some will not. So you may also be aware of what we call precautionary warnings. These are warnings that you see where it says may contain, or made in a facility, or made on shared equipment. It's really, really important to know that the terminology or the words that they use do not indicate the level of risk. These warnings are completely optional and voluntary on the manufacturer's part. So a lot of people think, parents and others think, that something that says may contain is much more dangerous than say made in a facility. And this actually is not the case at all. The exact wording that is used is completely arbitrary. And it's interesting to note also that the absence of a precautionary statement or warning doesn't mean that the product is safe for someone avoiding a particular food. So there are certain foods that seem to have a higher risk of cross-contamination, which we'll talk about in a minute. But for an example, there was a study done a few years back on dark chocolate, which often does not actually contain milk, which means milk is not added as an intentional ingredient. But the majority of the dark chocolate that did not list milk as an ingredient actually contained milk in an amount that would have caused a reaction in many people allergic to milk. So it was just from the processing in the facility, it was cross-contaminated with milk. And that's why chocolate is a food in particular that is easily cross-contaminated. And you'll see a lot of warnings, and you'll see sometimes a nut-free chocolate or you'll see a warning, may contain almonds, may contain peanuts, may contain whatever other nut. And a lot of times on dark chocolate, you'll see may contain milk. But again, even a product that doesn't have this warning, it's important to be aware of some of these foods that, for example, chocolate is something that is often cross-contaminated anyway. So you want to avoid these foods that have any kind of precautionary warning, not just ones that say may contain, because studies show that a significant portion of these, when they warn of possibility of containing an allergen, actually do contain an amount high enough to trigger a reaction in some children. The other thing to be aware of is you need to check the ingredients every time. Manufacturers do not have to warn us when they change ingredients. There was a popular snack cracker and a popular cupcake treat recently that the manufacturer added peanut flour. There's some names that you recognize that you wouldn't think, cheese crackers or cupcakes that just out of the blue pop up with peanut flour. Restaurants can change the way that they process foods like French fries. They may have a dedicated fryer, but then they may decide to fry the fries in the same fryer where they fry fish or shrimp, and now there's a possibility that those fries can be contaminated with fish or shellfish. So you definitely want to read ingredients and inquire about ingredients every time. There are some exemptions to the United States labeling laws. One important example is when you go to the bakery in a grocery store and you ask for 6 cookies or something to put in, they don't have to give you the exact ingredients on there. And often cakes and cupcakes are not actually made on the premise in grocery stores. And other times they get information that there may not be a particular allergen in ingredient. But again, this was at least one lawsuit and fatal reaction by a parent who the store offered a safe cookie to the child, and it actually contained nuts, and the child passed away. The information that the store said they had was that it did not contain nuts. They didn't have the accurate information, obviously. So things like this don't actually even have to have ingredients when they're packaged like that, or if you get a sandwich from the deli counter, they don't have to have the ingredients. So probably best avoided by people with food allergies. You want to work with the parents and medical providers in finding foods for children with allergies. Make sure that staff who is preparing food is trained. If you can keep a dedicated space in your kitchen for allergy-friendly meals, that's great. You always want to prepare the meals for food allergic students first and then set it aside. You want to make sure that your prep area is clean and free from cross-contact with allergens. Cross-contact, also commonly called cross-contamination, occurs when a food allergen inadvertently comes into contact with another food, and so some of that protein is transferred. Even things like there was an example where someone made a peanut butter sandwich, wiped the knife clean, and then prepared what was supposed to be a safe sandwich. That invisible amount of food protein can trigger reaction in certain children and adults. So even, if you have peanut butter, if you're using butter, you can't just wipe that knife clean. You want to keep that completely separate. Always it has to be a clean knife that goes into peanut butter or jelly or butter, or whatever the case may be. Once you prepare the allergy-friendly mood, you want to set it aside and store it in a labeled container or cover it. Again, home-baked foods are really high risk for cross-contact and unknown ingredients. Washing hands before and after serving meals is really important. Hand sanitizers are not what we want to remove food allergens because these are food protein, not bacteria. And actually, hand sanitizers, particularly the alcohol-based one, have been known to just kind of spread the allergens around. So you definitely want to be washing hands or using a good hand wipe. For the children, making sure that the eating area the tables and chairs are clean, especially with messy younger kids. And you want the kids to wash their hands before and after. Again, using commercial hand wipes can work, not antibacterial. Sometimes they can work better than kids washing hands because they have a tendency to just rinse their hands. And rinsing actually does not remove the food protein. You need to be using soap and water. It's really important to teach children not to share or trade food or plates, utensils, straws, glasses. Again, in Amaria's case, it was reported that another child who wasn't aware of her allergy gave her a peanut, And so these are younger kids, they're socialized to share, but you really want to make sure that the rule is that we share toys, we don't share food or trade food. Anytime food is served, these meals or snacks need to be monitored, and a lot of times in a preschool or daycare, a trained adult is actually sitting with the children during the meals. And you want them to be safe but not isolated. It's really not okay to have a child sitting by themselves. What a lot of schools and childcare do is to have the child sitting at the end of the table. Maybe all the students have assigned seats. So you have the child with allergies or the children with allergies at one end of the table. Everybody's aware of who they are, or all the staff is aware of who they are, not the students. And sitting with some children that can be trusted to sit next to them, and you can always keep an eye on them and monitor them. Not a lot of food allergy accommodations have been studied, but but peanut-free tables have been studied, and epinephrine use, again, that's the EpiPen or the AubiQ, is lower in schools that have peanut-free tables. So this may be an accommodation that does work well to keep children safer. So again, I want to remind you that preschool and daycare children are at the highest risk of having reactions in school. We don't get a warning on the day something terrible will happen. There's just no sign. These days start out like every other day, but severe reactions do happen every day, and we have to be prepared to react and to take the necessary steps quickly. The actions that you take today in the midst of an allergic reaction can mean the difference between life and death. So your knowledge and choices may mean that a child who is here today will be here next month, next week, and next year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina. And now it is my pleasure to pass the presentation to our next speaker, Tanisha Hopkins. Gina and I had the opportunity to present with Tanisha in person last month in New York City. Again, Tanisha is the Director of Health, Mental Health, and Nutrition at New York City's Administration of Child Services, Child and Family Well-Being.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Tanisha Hopkins, Director of Health, Mental Health, and Nutrition at ACS Child and Family Well-Being, and I'm going to go over briefly the Child Allergy Safety Plan and what are the different policies we have in place to support a Child Allergy Safety Plan, and explain why it must be in place at all our programs. Now, just to start off, I just want to say that, our main focus at Child and Family Well-Being is to make sure that we are meeting the child's well-being as far as providing a safe and productive environment for that child to thrive education-wise, emotionally, and socially. And in order to do so, the programs must establish, train staff, and implement and enforce systems of health and safety practices that ensure children are kept safe at all times. Now, let me go on to the other slide. Wait. Okay, now what safety practices and plans should be in place? Now, according to our Head Start Performance Standards, Part 1302.47, the safety practices, we have to make all programs must make sure that they develop a management system, including ongoing trainings, oversight, correction, continuous improvement. All programs must ensure all facilities, equipment, and materials, background checks, safety training, safety and hygiene practices, and administrative safety procedures are accurate. And also, all staff initially orientation within 3 months of hire must go on ongoing trainings in different areas. And I just want to go over the different areas where, new staff and, seasoned staff that's been there for years must continue to get training in. So I just want to touch on some of those, which is training in prevention and response to emergency due to food and allergy reactions, emergency preparedness, response and planning for emergencies, first aid, CPR. Also, in the administrative safety procedure part, in section 7, number 6, the child-specific health care needs, food allergies that include accessible plans of action for emergencies. For food allergies, a program must also post individual child allergy list where staff can view wherever food is being served. Why this is so important is that, when a child has an allergy, this is everyone's business within that program. So it behooves the program to make sure that they train their staff thoroughly, and they also put an allergy list in that classroom with the different children in that classroom that may have a certain allergy and what is the treatment. But also the child's confidentiality is covered because they'll have a sheet over that, but it's placed normally in the classroom, like up by the wall. It's not accessible to children, but whoever comes in and serves those children, the teacher, assistant teacher, even the substitute teacher at that time that's coming for that day, the allergy list is there, and they're brought aware about it. Also, to make sure you have a allergy list within the kitchen where that particular cook in that program is preparing the food, to make sure there's no cross contamination of food, and to give that child a substitute meal as to giving them something that they may be allergic to and may need treatment. Okay, now another policy we do have in place from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Article 47 of New York City Health Code, Article 4711 clearly states that there has to be a written plan in place, and it is required. And not only that, all programs have to make sure they develop a safety plan. It has to be reviewed annually, and it also has to be updated if anything is to change within that safety plan. Once that safety plan is established, it has to be approved by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Also, with permit renewal, if anything is to change within your safety plan while you're renewing your permit for your program, it will behoove you to make sure that you put those changes in writing and submit it so it can be approved by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Also, it has to be implemented, provided to parents and on request, and keep in an accessible location. The safety plan should also be provided to all staff, volunteers, with copies of the safety plan, and train all in implementing that safety plan. Training shall include drills in medical and other critical and emergency response procedures, including evacuation. Documentation that staff receive copies of the plan, training, and drills must maintained by the program and made available for inspection. Why the safety plan is so important, why it should be submitted at programs, and why it should be also provided to that parent, because in the event there is an emergency in that program, whether it's a fire, whether it's food allergies, or whether it's unfortunately an outbreak of some form of disease, catchy disease within the program, it's important that that parent also has a copy of the safety plan that is established where their child is attending daycare. So it's very important. Now, the medical record form provided or approved by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. This is a form that normally, when children are being enrolled into a program for the first time, usually it's like the family worker that will provide them with the documentation that they need to get filled out in order to enroll their child into Head Start or early child care. Now, with that medical form, it has to be filled out by the child's physician, and other forms need to be filled out by the parent. Now, that medical form needs to include the following. It should have the child's name, address, date of admission, their date of birth, parents' full name, where they reside, and where they work. Also, along with their active telephone numbers, name and address and telephone numbers of emergency contact persons in the event there is an emergency with the child and you can't get in contact with the parent. Also, name and address, telephone numbers of the child's primary health care provider. Also, within that medical record, there should be some sort of documentation about the child's family's medical history, child's history of allergies, medical illnesses, special health problems, medications, immunization records, and parental consent for emergency treatment. Why I'm stressing that this is so important in the event something is to happen to this child, whether they have anemia, they're very anemic, and let's say their outside is very hot, child passes out. What do? There needs to be a plan in place. You need to know what's going on with this child ahead of time and have this conversation with that parent so you know what exactly you need to do. Okay, in a situation with a child that that is anemic, it's hot outside. They should have fluids at all times. Give them a lot of water. But if they get dehydrated, they may pass out. So it's very important to have these conversations. So in the event, if the safety plan by the parent is to contact them, give them water, contact them, and they'll take them to the hospital or they'll call 911, that is what you do. Okay, where should medication be stored? Now, in the event a child may have certain ailments that require them to get any form of medication, the medication shall be kept in a clean area that is inaccessible to children. Now, if it's medication that requires to be stored in a separate refrigerator or a leak-proof container in a designated area, the program should do so. Also, the food should be stored in a refrigerator, separated from food and inaccessible to children, because we don't need any, freak accidents where, let's say, the child has a fish allergy, but it clearly states on their medical form that was filled out by their physician that if they have allergic reaction, their treatment is Benadryl, because their allergy may not be as potent as others to need an EpiPen. So if you have Benadryl there, it has to be kept. It has to be stored somewhere that is not accessible to children, may have to be refrigerated, or just kept somewhere where it's accessible to that teacher, or accessible to anywhere in that program where that child goes, and he or she can be treated. Now, what ACS looks for in a child's folder. Now, we have as you know, with the programs that are that have contracts within ACS, we have program specialists that go out and they monitor the different programs, and sometimes they have to go and randomly pick cases, and they have a checklist that they have to abide by. And when they do so, it behooves that program to make sure within the child's folder that they have the immunization records for the child, the written plans from the parent, and a consent form signed by the parent. Why we say that? Because, like I said, they have a checklist and certain information they may need that should have been in the medical form to begin with, so they can go and monitor the program and check off what needs to be important within the process of them monitoring the program and making sure that they're up to code. And that's my presentation on child allergy and safety plan. If anybody has any other questions, you can feel free to comment now, and we will answer all your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanisha and Gina. That was really great.
You're welcome.
We did just get 2 questions in so far, and they're kind of a little bit more food allergy related. So I'm hoping, Gina, maybe you could chime in. And the first one you actually touched on a little bit when you were talking about just seating arrangements in the center, in a classroom, something like that. But someone asked from their center, what would be the best approach to protecting a child with food allergies at lunchtime if, let's say, their buddy or their pal or their classmate is eating a food that they're allergic to?
Well, the first thing you want to do is just have some general teaching, no sharing, no trading food, and be really explicit, because sharing is something, we socialize our children to share. I had a friend once whose she taught her son no sharing, and he said he ate a cookie at lunch, and she's like, where did you get that cookie? And he said he traded. So you have to really, really spell it out for kids. The other thing is assigned seats is probably a really great idea. Having, one seat at the end, and if it's an allergy that's easily avoided, you can kind of monitor the kids and make sure that somebody eating the allergen is not sitting next to them. If it's necessary, if there are multiple allergies, or if there's, impulsivity in the child, obviously at a young age, that's probably an issue anyway, you can have the teacher or an aide sitting at the table. And if that's what happens every day, that's kind of the norm. It'll just accept it, and it can help them, learn better manners and socialize together. Obviously, supervising the lunch, washing hands before and after is another great thing to do. And sometimes, depending on the children's maturity level, just general teaching about food allergies, that we're really careful. And this is one of the reasons, without disclosing the child's private medical information, but just sharing that, hey, a lot of kids have food allergies, and that's why we're really careful. And our rule is we only eat our own food.
Great, thank you. Kind of one more. I know me and you get a lot at FAIR, and just other people as well, and it's kind of on the topic of birthdays or celebrations. This attendee said that they have set a policy of no food for birthdays or holidays at their center, but then what do they do when a parent sends in a special treat, either cookies or cupcakes? The kids get really excited and they feel bad about disappointing them, but they're not sure what to do.
Yeah, that's very common, and we really want to think about excluding the food and not the child. The first thing is decide whether this is a guideline or a recommendation. So if it's the center policy or guideline, you want to be really explicit in explaining that to parents. So if you've decided no food for birthdays, you want to be as clear as possible, put it in writing, and then tell the parents exactly what will happen if they violate the policy. So we're celebrating birthdays in a different way, no food for birthdays. If you bring cupcakes or cookies or something to eat, if you send it in with your child, we're going to send it home with you at the end of the day, or whatever the case may be, or we will ask you to come and pick it up. We're not going to give it out to the children. And then give them a list of alternatives. It's becoming more and more common not to celebrate not to celebrate with food in schools. And so, can you send in a game? Can you donate a book? Can the parent come in and read? Can the children be given coupons for extra recess or no homework? In the younger ages, a lot of times they have like an autograph book or a stuffed animal that's white muslin, and you can sign it. Like each child can get a marker and draw something or sign it and send it home, or they can do the same thing with a T-shirt. But give them a list of acceptable and fun substitutes for celebrating with food.
Great, thank you. We just got a couple more coming in. Tanisha, I think maybe you could answer this, and maybe Gina chime in. Someone was asking, when you do post the children's food allergies on a list in the classroom, does that list have to be covered for confidentiality, or can it be posted openly in the classroom?
No, it has to be covered for confidentiality. I've gone out to a lot of sites, and what they normally do is the teacher will have it posted on a wall, kind of high up for a visual for an adult to see, and they'll have a whole list of the different children within that same classroom that have a particular allergy and what is the treatment, but they'll also have a sheet printed over it to cover it that says, food and asthma, food allergies or asthma list, something like that. And normally they'll put in like a clear folder. I've seen that, and they'll post it up on the wall, so that way the child's information is confidential. The whole world doesn't have to see which child, what name, and things of that nature. Whoever the teacher is, or let's say a substitute comes in the classroom, and if they have to go over there and let the substitute teacher know, listen, you're here for today, but and take the folder up and lift up the first sheet, the cover sheet, and let them know who has allergies and who can eat certain things and who cannot. Hello?
Yep,
I hope that
great.
answers the person's question.
That did. Thank you so much. And just one more for you, Tanisha. You talked in your presentation about the written safety plans, and this person just had a quick question asking, can the written plan be from the child's physician instead of the parent?
I think the written safety plan, it should be a combination. It's not only it can come from the physician, but the parent has to be in agreement with it, with the safety plan as well. I hope that can answer their question. Because a lot of times, depending on what the situation is, and if the child has like we're doing today, food allergy, and on their medical record it states they have a food allergy to peanuts, and they'll list like what are the different signs that the child is having an allergic reaction and what is the treatment. But also the program should also go over with mom like what is the safety plan in the event this happens. Why? Because at the end of the day, that parent must also sign consent to, let's say, the family worker to reach out to the child's physician to verify all of this. So, everything plays hand in hand. So, yeah, the physician can give a plan, but at the end of the day, the parent has to be on board with it. They have to give consent saying that in the event my child has allergic reaction to peanuts, you are to, you give them the EpiPen that they provide. But all in all, everybody has to coincide, work together, and the parents have to come up with some sort of safety plan.
Oh, great. Thank you. And agreed. Everyone needs to be involved and on the same page.
Yes, and also sometimes all it takes is a conversation with the parent. Just
Right.
one conversation with the parent. Find out, what allergies they have, what are the treatments. Now, in the event of emergency, what is the plan? What do you want us to do? Make sure that plan is in writing and kept in that child's folder. It's very
Right.
important, or kept in the classroom as well. Copy kept in the classroom as well. It's very important.
Agreed. Thank you for that answer. And just to let you know, if any of you have any additional questions after the webinar, I know this was a lot of information. We are definitely here to follow up with. If you have any specific ones about food allergies, you can always ask us through our website. We have a contact us form, or Tanisha and any of the other staff at ACS would be more than willing to get back to you. So feel free to percolate on this a little bit and then reach out to us with any questions that you have afterwards. So before we wrap up for today, I just wanted to mention a couple of resources that we have on FAIR's website. Our website is foodallergy.org. We have some really great free training programs. One of them is called Keeping Students Safe and Included. It is an online training course that's designed to help school staff and administrators become better prepared to manage these students with food allergies. Now, it's geared kind of more towards a K through 12 school environment, but a lot of the information will be applicable to preschool and daycare centers. And a lot of the information in the presentation was actually covered today as well. So feel free to download that and check it out. There's a free knowledge check at the end, so you can kind of check yourself on what you've learned. And then also there is a free training on recognizing and responding to anaphylaxis. It's a course that will teach people about the different causes of anaphylaxis and what the proper emergency response should be. And in that presentation are also short videos from each of the epinephrine autoinjector manufacturers that really demonstrate how to administer an EpiPen. So right now on the market, there's an AviQ, there's an EpiPen, and then there's a generic Adrenaclick. So you can watch the videos to familiarize yourself with, if you did find yourself in an emergency, how you would administer an auto-injector. Then we have a lot of information about the CDC guidelines and supplemental resources. We developed a lot of tip sheets and webinars and handouts that break down the CDC guidelines. They have a lot of great recommended practices in there that Gina talked about in her presentation. And then at the end of those guidelines, there's a section specifically for early child care and education administrators and staff. So you can kind of familiarize yourself with what the CDC is putting out as national guidelines for managing these young preschool students with food allergies. And then lastly, that's a link to our food allergy and anaphylaxis emergency care plan. You can fill it out online and download it. It's available in English and Spanish. and it just outlines some of the signs and symptoms to look for and when to administer an auto-injector. Okay, so I think that wraps up everything for today. I would like to once again give a huge thanks to Gina and Tanisha, and then a big thanks for all of the attendees out there in New York City for joining us today. We hope to work with you in the future as new things come down the road. And again, please, check out our website and contact us if you have any additional questions. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.